and live on Twitch.
Hello to everyone.
No echoes.
No, because we're figuring it out. We are becoming masters of this.
This is awesome.
This setup.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Happy Saturday. Happy day before Mother's Day. Happy spring. We're excited today.
We are really excited, even though I'm also very tired.
We are both very tired. We were both up late rereading part 1 of Passing and taking notes. Yeah, show them your books and your fancy.
I think
we have different copies. This is a nice little Amazon Basics. It was a 2-pack, came with a green one and a black one, but it feels very luxurious.
I like my lick feel. I like my lick, whatever they're called.
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
Tarums. I like them.
Yeah.
For writing, I like them.
Yeah.
For my planner, it's the paper's too thin, but like for writing, it's perfect. Anyway. Anywho,
so
what are we doing here?
What kind of nerds we are? We have specific notebooks for this project for writing down notes and whatnot. So if you are new here, Alyssa and I have started a very fun reading project. Would you like to tell them about it?
So we started a project because we just had a conversation one day about this whole idea of passing, and we just realized we both wanted to know more, and we were absolutely geeked out about just the whole concept. What is it like to pass? What is it like to have had someone who passed? What is it like finding out that someone you're with is passing? Like, there's just so many layers to it, and so many good stories, and that we just wanted to read them all. So we went one day and made a giant list, and we are diving in first with Passing by Nella
Larsen. Yeah.
So we are here to do the first ever actual bookish deep dive. What do we want to call this?
It is a deep dive, right? So This is our second episode, okay? Our first episode was an introductory to who we are and what the project is. So this is episode 2, but the first episode where we start talking about Passing. Please know that there will be spoilers, okay? This is not just like a book review. This whole project is about talking about the topic of passing racial identity. We are digging deep and talking about everything in this book. The book is in 3 parts. We're doing 3 episodes to discuss each part. So just know that if you have not read Passing and you don't want to be spoiled, perhaps read at least part 1 and then come back and listen to this and then follow along with us for the next 2 conversations for part 2 and 3.
Yes, please do. It'd be nice to be interactive. Not that Naomi and I can't just talk to ourselves for hours on end, because we do that all day, every day. But no. So we're going to take you through chapter by chapter and our thoughts almost page by page and as succinctly as possible to break down the story and what's going on in our thoughts while we're reading it, especially the second time through. I will say that chapter 3 did not get easier. It just got slightly less shocking because I knew it was coming, and we'll get there later. But I was still shocked. It was like a hair's amount of difference of shocking. Right. I could prepare myself for it, but we will get to chapter 3.
Right. It's almost like when you taste something that wasn't very good and then you try it later, you're like, nope, still not good.
Still not good. Still don't like it.
Yep, still don't like it.
I did all the things I could do mentally to prepare myself for it.
And nope, still don't like it. Still not good.
Still don't like it. So, yeah. So where do you want to start? I mean, did you change? I know the only thing we've really talked about, we've also been hiding our thoughts from each other pretty much.
Which is very hard. Tell them how hard this is, Alyssa. Tell them how hard.
We talk to each other all day, every day. Sorry, I'm going to get comfier for this. And it's just been really hard to just not vomit out all of our thoughts, because we do that with everything else we read anyway.
Exactly.
So it's really hard.
It takes a lot of restraint for us with this particular project because, like she said, we read a lot of books together and we're used to talking about them as we're reading them. And we can't do that here, or else it's like we've already had the conversation, which we're supposed to be saving up for the live shows. So it's a little challenging.
Yeah, we want like the real reactions. You want to see like the realness.
Yes. Yes.
I need help. So,
oh boy. Okay. Yeah.
I'm assembling more stationery.
I know. We're trying to get our, things together here. So, how do we want to do this?
So do you want to start just at chapter 1? So we have general thoughts. I think we each have a section that just talks about one of the characters, Claire, and the way that Claire is discussed. And then we have chapter by chapter our notes.
Yeah. So my notes are broken down. When I read a page, if I see something I want to take a note on, I just in my notes do page whatever it is, and then kind of talk about what the passage was, and then my notes about that passage. That's kind of how my notes are laid out.
Okay. Mine are similar, probably fewer page numbers, but they kind of follow along every so often. I jotted down a page number, so there's reference points throughout, but I'm also pretty highlighted.
Yeah, exactly.
In the text. So maybe we should just start right off at chapter 1, because talking about our general thoughts and anything about Claire is not going to make any sense until you know who Claire is.
True.
Right? So let's introduce Irene and Claire.
Irene and Claire.
Irene and Claire. So who wants to talk?
Well, so let's start. So Irene Irene and Claire were childhood friends. Okay. And so we are some 12 years ahead of them being children, and they've lived separate lives. They have not really been in contact. And so this is where we are with where Irene is and where Claire is. Childhood friends. They haven't had any contact with each other, and we're getting close to when they're going to have some kind of encounter. So this is what it's leading up to. Yeah.
So we open. This isn't quite chronological though. Chapter 1 isn't before chapter 2 and chronologically, but we open with Irene receiving a letter from Claire, and it's a lot of her thoughts about knowing it's from Claire and describing how nice the stationery is and how like foreign paper and all this. So you get this idea of Claire as this like wealthy, sophisticated, fancy lady. And there's something
very showy. Very showy.
Yes, it's very look at me.
Yeah.
I want everyone to see me.
Yes.
Definitely somebody who wants to be seen.
Right. Down to her stationery, right? Like, look at my work, down to my stationery.
Yep.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of hesitancy from Irene, and I just feel like Irene's very timid, like toes the line, like she's traditional, doesn't take risks like she is. Irene is, and you can get that from the beginning of the story. But remember, Irene is telling us all of this. So everything has to be taken with a grain of salt.
Right.
Because Irene is telling this whole story.
Exactly.
You need to keep remembering that.
We do need to keep remembering that. We do. Yeah. Which makes her somewhat unreliable.
Because you get introduced to this idea that there's something between the two of them that makes Irene nervous of her.
Nervous and extremely cautious.
Yes.
She's extremely cautious. Like, when you receive a letter from an old friend, I don't think that you would initially think that would be something where you put up the big, caution sign. But there is a lot of caution on this one page and these few paragraphs. She's
it's a very short chapter. So yep. Yeah. So, and she goes on and on and on about this inner monologue about Claire and how she's dangerous and how she's always stepping on the edge of danger. So
right.
There's just this very ominous sense of Claire before you ever even meet Claire. There's something.
And I
like
have that part highlighted because, so let me read it. So she says, this, she reflected, was a piece with all that she knew of Claire Kendry, stepping always on the edge of danger, always aware, but not drawing back or turning aside, certainly not because of any alarms or feeling of outrage on the part of others. So just that one little, passage there, it's like, oh, I think we're going to be in for something with Claire.
Oh, yeah.
Because, when you get a letter from an old friend and this is your thought, this is where you go and you think about that person, that's kind of saying a lot.
But there's also this magnetism. So there's this fear, but Irene is just drawn to her aura, being,
her essence, she's got that
dangerousness. Yes.
Right.
I don't know what.
Yeah, exactly.
And as try as she might, she can't seem to get away from Claire. And I feel like there's always this tension of not wanting to be in the thrall of Claire, but being unable to escape Claire. And that goes throughout the entire text.
I was getting ready to say, and we see that, and not just with Irene, but with many people who come into contact with Claire.
Well, they call her, probably like a few paragraphs later, they make a point of calling her cat-like. Claire Kendry is cat-like. And she is
that not perfect?
Yeah, certainly that was the word which best described Claire Kendry. And she really is. And that's when I started writing down all the words that get to use to describe her. She's very... There's this mysteriousness. There's a little bit of evil. There's a little bit of danger. There's a little bit of sexy. There's a little bit of all of the things happening at once. Right. And sort of never knowing where you are.
And with a person having all of that happening at once, it is overpowering and overwhelming for other people. It's a lot to take in.
You can't stop looking at it.
Right. I want to see this movie too. Like after reading this, I want to see this in visual format. I need to.
Oh yeah. It's got to be like so good. Like,
so good.
I want to see which actress actually plays Claire, because Claire
I'm not familiar with that actress. I saw her name. The girl that we're talking about that we like, the one that narrates the audiobook, she's Irene. And I could totally see her as Irene.
Yeah.
But I'm not familiar with the actor. Tessa something. If anybody watches Westworld, they'll know who we're talking about. Tessa. You know what? We'll make a note of it. We'll put a link or something to the casting.
It's just good. It's good.
Yeah.
It's a good time.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, so she gets this letter, right?
Yeah.
We get introduced to Claire. So then we start getting more backstory of Irene and Claire.
Right.
Claire and Irene.
Right. And they had two very different upbringings. Irene grew up very middle class. And from what I gather, a wholly Black family, complete. Whereas Claire grew up very poor. Mother died when she was young. Her father was white and he was a janitor. So very different upbringings.
Very, very different. And her dad's a drunk and
right.
Where is this where we get the apparently very mean. And it sounds like
a note here too.
It sounds like Claire learned to survive, because there's that whole scene. Is that here in this chapter where they talk about the little blue couch and and her taking that money so she could get her new dress for the picnic, and how she just doesn't care, right? She's
right.
He can rail and scream and do whatever he wants, and she doesn't. She's getting what she wants, and she doesn't care who stands in her way or what the punishments or repercussions are. She's going to achieve those things. And you can see that in her at a young age.
Yeah, because where is that line? Because it's okay, page one. So this is talking about, yeah. So okay, yeah, this is when she was sitting on that couch putting together that little frock or whatever, and her father is just kind of like losing his mind, being, I guess, the wonderful man that he is, yelling and whatnot. And then you kind of talked about how she just kind of like moves to like the edge of the sofa and just kind of
Yeah.
continues with what she's doing. And my note was like, I'm wondering if Claire is really afraid of her father. I'm wondering, um, has she somewhat tuned him out and kind of like gone off into her own little world because these actions of his are so frequent? And rather than her being afraid, she's instead maybe annoyed by them. And so she just kind of moves herself to the side and kind of like tunes him out and just goes off into her own world and continues her task of the day. So I'm wondering like where she falls in line with her father and his somewhat cruel behavior.
Truthfully, I feel like she's moved. She's built an internal wall, and it's almost like it's noise and it's over there, and she's here, and when it tries to infiltrate her world, she just moves away from it. She doesn't care. She's over it. She's doing what she needs to do.
Yeah.
And it's nobody else's business. She doesn't want to hear you.
Yeah.
Claire is taking care of Claire.
Right.
Clearly the world is not going to take care of Claire. Nobody else is going to take care of her. She's going to find a way to survive.
And I guess that makes sense too, because then just a few lines down, we're told that Bob Kendry died in a silly saloon fight. And the way that Larsen describes Claire's reaction to seeing her father dead, she's 15 at the time, and she's just standing there, her lips pressed together, her thin arms folded across her narrow chest. She's just staring down at his familiar pasty white face with a sort of disdain. And I thought to myself, I could almost see her, not that she may not be sad, but maybe less sad and more glad that she's rid of not just him, but this situation of poorness. And now there is a path has opened up for her to seek better and to have better, all of what she has clearly has desired for a long time.
Yes. And I think there's also some pent up rage there for the years
for sure.
Because doesn't she begin to just start screaming or something at some point here?
Yes.
And it's like a release of. It says the outburst had ceased as suddenly as it began. It sounds like she just lets it all out, and then it's almost like, we're done. I'm leaving this baggage and I'm moving on with my life.
Right.
Forget you.
Yeah, exactly. And then we get into, this is where they just describe her as cat-like.
And then
seen across the long her years. The thing had more the appearance of an outpouring of pent-up fury than an overflow of grief for her dead father. Though she had been, Irene admitted, fond enough of him in her own rather cat-like way. And it says cat-like. Certainly that was the word which best described Claire Kendry. If any single word could describe her. Sometimes she was hard and apparently without feeling at all. Sometimes she was affectionate and rashly impulsive. This is when you read later on in this book, like you see all of these descriptors of Claire like playing out.
And I wonder how much her dad, I'm just thinking about this now, how much of her husband is a piece of her dad. Does that make any sense?
Oh, yes, it does. Yes.
Has she internalized some of whatever that abuse was with her father? Has she then channeled into acceptance in her own marriage?
That is such a daggone good point. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. Yeah. And we don't know much about her mother, right? She died when she was younger. We don't know how her mother was. We don't know how the relationship between her mother and her father were.
Yeah, her mother's almost irrelevant.
Yeah. but we don't know how she may have affected her.
It seems like all the mother does is give her blackness, and then she goes.
Right.
And that's all. Right. That's all she gives to this story.
Right. And is Bob Kendry, well, two questions. Was Bob Kendry and her mother married? Were they married? Was he really in love with her? Did they have a good marriage, a good partnership, a good friendship, good relationship? Is he angry that the mother died? Does he feel resentful? Like, there's so many things that are like in the gap there that we don't know.
We don't know
anything.
Is
he angry at Claire because the mother's gone? Does he resent her because the mother's gone?
Does he resent Claire because now his life is this way because without the baby, his choices wouldn't maybe have been out in the open?
Right.
Because the aunts aren't very happy with their brother.
Yeah.
And the choices he's made. We'll get to the aunts.
Yeah.
But is he upset that he's been left with this child that not only has taken him out of his white privilege, but and made him a poor janitor? Because they say that it's weird that he's a janitor because he's also he went to school with all the other dads,
right?
And why is he so different socioeconomically?
Yeah.
And is there, and it sounds like the aunts are rather well off. The family has some money of some sort. It doesn't say how much, but they have something.
Yep.
Is there resentment that this is how his life has turned out, all because at the end of the day, he had a baby with a black lady?
Right. And now he has to raise this black child on his own.
Alone. Yeah.
Right.
And then the double whammy of being a single dad.
Exactly.
And an outcast from his family or his world sphere.
Right. Right. Yeah.
This book is so damn good.
I know. I mean,
you said, you go, well, it could have been you're like, it's really perfect as it is, but it wouldn't have been awful if it was also longer. And I'm like, because it doesn't need anything to be longer because we want to speculate all this.
You're right. Because I thought about it after you said it. I said, because, okay, so I did say, I wish it were longer because I had so many questions. Mm-hmm. But then I thought about it later. I said, you know what? I like having the questions.
There's something really well done about how the words that were chosen and the length of everything. It's just right. There's a mastery in writing here.
That and I do think she doesn't have the little mysteries that we have throughout here where we're wondering, well, was it this? Could have been that. Well, why does he feel this way? I like that. And you're right. Having it longer and having everything fleshed out takes something away from the story as it is. You were absolutely right about that.
Yeah. There's an engagement as the reader that wouldn't be lost where you can really get into the story and start trying to figure out the mysteries and that would be totally lost. Yeah. But you get so much enjoyment from what is actually on the page. You can follow a story, you get all the feelings, you don't need to think deeper. But then when you start to peel back the layers, you're like, oh man, there's so much in this. There's so many questions. It's much. It's really well done.
Yeah.
So we're still in chapter 1, I think.
Right. Yeah. And I don't know about your book, but according to my book, we're still on page 2, crossing over to page 3.
Yeah. That's where I'm at.
Yeah.
But that's almost the end of the chapter. It's only a 3-page chapter, at least in my book.
Yep. So. Me too. Me too.
But then I guess she does finally, after reminiscing about all these things, Irene does finally give in to the temptation, and she opens the letter. And
what a letter!
I just what I love about a lot of the distant dialogue with Claire, when they're on the phone or when they're getting these letters, there's a lot of ellipses. So it's not, you're never getting the full conversation. You're getting the clipped memories of somebody retelling the story to you, right? So it's kind of nice. Yeah. It's real. It's got a realness to it that you often don't get.
I agree.
So you read nicer than I do. Do you want to read
this portion of the letter?
Yes.
Let's read a portion of the letter. For I am lonely, so lonely, cannot help longing to be with you again, as I have never longed for anything before. I have wanted many things in my life. You can't know how in this pale life of mine, I am all the time seeing the bright pictures of that other that I once thought I was glad to be free of. It's like an ache, a pain that never ceases. I mean, good grief.
She's
If that does not
very
read
dramatic.
like, but also when I first read that, I was like, oh, this reads like a love letter. Then I got very confused. Because unlike you, I had not read the introduction, so there were certain things that I still haven't finished it, guys.
There is this undertone of unrequited, how like homosexual love that's going on in this story, and you kind of don't know if it's one-sided because Claire kind of talks to everybody in this very flirtatious and
sensual kind of manner. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And Irene is definitely very attracted to her in whatever way there is an attraction.
Yes, it talks about Irene turning red and all this stuff. Like
it is, yeah. And then it plays in later, I feel like, with her husband, how much of that is, where does her anger, so many things, but there's this drama, and I think in the Britt Bennett interview we watched, she mentions that Britt Bennett, is that her last name? It's Bennett?
Yes, you're correct.
There is this idea of Larsen's playing with darkness and light a lot. You hear a lot of like things are dark, a lot of things are bright, a lot of things are dark, a lot of things are bright.
Yeah.
And then I noticed like weather, when I was going through it the second time, the weather becomes like a whole big thing. So like in part one, like chapter 1, we're just in an interior. We're in the interior, we're inside Irene's thoughts. It's all very insular. Then the next chapter, it's hot, it's stifling. And
you can feel it too.
Something is brewing, something's in the air. And then the next chapter, it's rainy and it's dark and there's like a storm brewing, but it just doesn't quite break until it does. And then we're back to the internal space in chapter 4. And so she's really playing with a lot of these other things to create the scene. And it's not just, it's so beautifully done. It's just so, the mastery that she has in this little story is just fantastic.
In this little story, guys, like this is a very, very short story. We're talking 120 or 30 something pages.
But then I guess the chapter 1 ends, if this was the movie, it'd be fading to black to the next scene, and you would have that time in Chicago. The word stood out from among the many paragraphs of other words, bringing them with a clear, sharp remembrance in which even now, after 2 years, humiliation, resentment, and rage were mingled. So we're 2 years from all of this.
Yeah. And I did make a note about that letter and how much I thought it read like a love letter, and how I double underlined the word longed. Like longing for something that's just full of yearning and desire, and that's pretty tense. It's intense. That's just not like I miss you.
I have a question. Where is chapter 1 chronologically? Because if she's received a letter from Claire that's 2 years, that's referring to something that happened 2 years ago, is that after the end of this book? And then how long has this letter been sitting?
That is a very good question. Because they refer to this time in Chicago, and then we're taken to that time in Chicago. So,
or is there 2 years between this and like the next one? Oh, there's 2 years between this and the next one. That's what it is, right? Because they meet and then they re-meet.
Oh, right. Yes, because that's the re-encounter.
I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah, got it. Right. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I was like, gosh, she's been holding on to this letter a long time.
Right. So the other thing that I had noted about the letter was that the letter reads as if Claire had been secretly in love with Irene. But I wasn't certain if that was reciprocated on Irene's part. So that was my thought and question there, because again, I didn't have that foresight from the introduction. And I was like, what's going on here?
Well, she says, and you can read this two ways in the letter, for I wouldn't now perhaps and have this wild desire if I hadn't seen you that time in Chicago. So What is the wild desire? Is it the wild desire for Irene? Is it the wild desire to flirt with her blackness now that she's been white for so long?
Right.
Is it
something else? It's just to cause. Is it just to be messy?
Yeah. Claire's what is very wild very desire?
Messy. Yeah.
She is.
And then she likes being messy.
She does, and she likes
around being messy. She does.
Because that whole chapter 3 is all her setting up big jokes for herself.
Oh my God!
Honestly, yes. It's just like it's all a big setup on Irene. It reads to me. It's like yeah. But anyway, we should get to chapter 2 before we get to chapter 3.
Okay, all right. So that was chapter 1.
That was chapter 1,
folks. Listen, guys.
It's been 30 minutes. We've only talked about one chapter.
Okay, again, if you have not read Passing, I don't know if it's clear or not, but you should read it. You should read it. It is a fantastic story.
It's so good.
Oh boy. Okay. All right, chapter. So now we're in Chicago, and the first time I read it, that first paragraph where Larsen is describing the day, a brilliant day, hot with a brutal staring sun, pouring down rays that were like molten rain, like that whole description of the day, it makes you feel a little sticky. I felt a little hot and sticky. And I was right there with them. And so this is how we enter into chapter 2. Irene's been out shopping for the day. She's looking for gifts for her 2 sons. And it's so hot, she becomes a bit faint, flags down a taxi, and the taxi takes her to a place called the Drayton. And
what I think is interesting about the taxi is that before we ever even know any more about Irene, we know that Irene can pass, because that taxi driver, as he's helping her, he's like, Miss Ma'am, you look horrible. Where do you want to go?
Hops out of the car to let her in, to get her into the seat. Yes.
And you 100% know that in 1920 Chicago, nobody would have done that if she couldn't have passed.
Right. But it is not yet clear here whether she passes in her life 100% or just at various opportune times.
Yes, because then she goes to this fancy hotel and she goes up to the fancy rooftop restaurant for some iced tea so that she can recover with all the other fancy people.
Right. Now,
I eat white people.
I eat white people. Now, when she gets there, there was a line that stood out to me that has nothing to do with Claire, but it was my first little red flag about Irene's husband. And so
no wait, that's the one about Christians.
So Irene is sitting down, she's got her tea, and she's kind of recounting, the day and what was going on, and she was trying to track down this book for her son. And she says, why was it that almost invariably he wanted something that was difficult or impossible to get, like his father, forever wanting something that he couldn't have? And I was like, oh, well, what does that line mean?
You already know that her husband's unsatisfied with something. Somewhere
something.
He is unsatisfied. And we do find out, I think, in this chapter, but some of his more, I have that one down too.
Yeah, because I was like, okay, let's just note that for later. Yes. Yeah.
But then she gets upset because these people come in, and this beautiful woman and this man come in, and he seems a bit nervous and fidgety, but they come and they sit down next to her, and she just wants her space, and they sort of invade her tranquility and her space.
Right.
And she can't stop looking at this woman.
Mm-hmm.
And the woman's looking at her, and eventually this man disappears. Whatever, he runs away. He's he's just there for later for us to discuss Claire's character. But
exactly.
He goes away, and there's just this sort of stare down, and Irene thinking over and over and over about, is this when she's thinking, like, is she being, does somebody know
stressed me
that
out.
she shouldn't be here? Like,
this whole thing.
She's describing Claire and how beautiful she is. She's worried about being caught out for not having to be there, not being allowed to be there.
Right.
So there's this whole running inner monologue going on. Did that woman
almost sweating
mm-hmm.
during this whole thing? I felt so nervous
because you don't want her to be
Larsen's writing.
Yeah, because she said, could that woman somehow know that here before her very eyes on this rooftop of the Drayton sat, am I allowed to say that, like a Negro?
Yeah.
But then, I think this is the really important part of understanding how somebody like Claire may have gotten away with what she gets away with for so long, is this next paragraph. The absurd, impossible, white people were so stupid about such things that for all that they usually asserted that they were able to tell by the most ridiculous means, fingernails, palms of hands, shapes of ears, teeth, and other equally silly rot, they always took for her for an Italian, a Spaniard, a Mexican, a gypsy. It is almost like, because it's assumed that you can't possibly be there. If there's something fishy, it cannot possibly be that thing, because it would never be a Black person. So it must be something else.
Yep. I had that whole
and it must be something that is acceptable, but on the maybe
you're another other.
You're an other, but you're an other that can be here in place with me. But you are not that thing that can't be.
Right.
You most assuredly can't be that, because that would never happen.
Absurd.
It would never happen.
Right.
And so, like, and that explains exactly how Claire can do what Claire does, because despite the fact because later she even says, as she's sitting here just talking about to herself about Claire and Claire's looks and Claire's eyes and Claire's this and Claire's mouth and Claire's, she says, I think it's later in the chapter, she goes, surely, like, or maybe it's even in chapter 3, she goes, no, those are the eyes of a Black woman. She may have blonde hair, and she may have this, and she may have that, but those are the eyes of a Black woman.
That's right.
And even if everybody else could sit there and have that same mental Olympics, they would never have that thought, because it just could never be a Black woman, right?
Exactly.
Because then you have to admit a whole bunch of other things that would make you have to face your whatever, your choices that you don't believe in because you're a racist jerk.
Exactly. Yeah. I tell you, that whole scene of her sitting on that rooftop and looking at Claire, who she didn't know was Claire at the time, and wondering, does this woman know that I'm a Negro? Like, can she tell? That stressed me out so
But
deeply.
Irene says it wasn't that she was ashamed of being a Negro or even having it declared. It was about being ejected from any place, even in the polite and tactful way in which the Drayton would probably do it.
Right.
That disturbed her.
Right. But it disturbed me as the reader.
I think it would disturb anybody that, like, if you were ever doing or feeling like you didn't belong somewhere, but you were somehow able to be there, and everybody was accepting of you, that fear of being found out is real. And it's scary. Even if you know that nothing truly awful is going to happen to you, it's just going to be highly embarrassing.
Embarrassing and humiliating.
Fear, or this idea that you don't belong. Nobody wants to be that person, and I think if you grew up as a child, you've had this feeling before to some degree.
Exactly.
Because there was always a moment when you were in or out. And if you were the out person with the in people,
right,
there's like this fear that like maybe they'll figure out that I'm just not cool.
Right.
It's not the same level, but like,
right, but still,
it's such a human feeling. It's like you don't want to be an outcast.
Right.
Nobody wants to be kicked out.
And let alone have that happen in front of so many people. Mm-hmm. Not like it would have been a private situation. It would have happened in front of a lot of people.
Yes.
It's humiliating.
Yes.
Yeah, but that was a very tense scene. But I liked being in Irene's head with all of those thoughts and oh man. Ooh,
yes, but she can't ignore this woman. She has to keep staring at this woman.
She couldn't stop.
All her efforts to ignore her were futile. Right. Like, those are the words. It was futile.
Yeah.
Nothing. She has to stare at this beautiful woman.
Right.
And she keeps describing her. Where are all these descriptions? I mean, it's like Claire gets described with like her mouth is a scarlet flower and she's got ivory skin and
nice clothes too. Yeah.
Beautiful clothing, strange languorous eyes. It's all very it's just all very slow and molassesy, drippy.
Yeah.
Sexy. Like
yeah, there was a very sensual feeling to her describing Claire.
Mm-hmm. And she most always has these descriptions of Claire.
Yeah.
Throughout. Every time she has to describe Claire, it ends up being this very romanticized, sexy description.
Well, there's an undertone of desire there, isn't it, with her when she's describing Claire? Yeah.
Always. Mm-hmm. So, woo! but then Claire laughs. Eventually they talk to each other, right? So eventually there's the I think I know you. Why do I know you conversation?
Exactly.
And Irene just can't place her. She can't figure out why she knows this woman from her childhood. Because not even Irene has noticed that she's not actually white quite yet. She wants, it's like she's trying to figure out who this white woman is. I don't know this white woman. Why does she think she knows me? And then she laughs. And then her little trill, magical, just so enchanting little fairy laugh comes.
Right.
And now she knows. Boom, it's Claire.
But can I point out something that stood out for me?
You may.
And so Irene says, and through her perplexity, there came the thought that the trick which her member had played her was for some reason more gratifying than disappointing to her old acquaintance, that she didn't mind not being recognized. And what I wrote was, it felt like in that moment, that where Irene didn't recognize who Clara was, it's almost like that moment may have been gratifying for Claire because it kind of confirmed her ability that she could still pass with such ease. And perhaps she even got like a little slight enjoyment watching Irene kind of fumble for trying to figure out like, who is this woman?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like there's always some kind of a cat and mouse type game going on with Claire. Right?
Claire likes knowing that she always has the upper hand in some way.
Yes.
She likes to know that she always has that little piece of control, that little bit of, because she could have easily decided to go, oh, I must be mistaken, and walked away and known that she had fooled somebody who had known her for so long, presumptively for quite a long time.
Exactly.
She doesn't. She lets the cat out of the bag. She giggles and
all that. Yeah.
All that. And now they know. Now they know who they are.
And so these little things to me, like they're giving the reader, to me, like they're more and more of who Claire is. These little brief moments that are kind of describe the whole being of Claire and all of her cat-like ways.
and she's provocative. And she says once that she feels that the way, before she knows it's Claire, she goes, the way she looks at the waiter is too provocative. There's something too provocative about it, but she's not quite sure. And then after Claire orders them tea, Irene's like, yep, nope, that's too provocative. You're not supposed to talk to the waiter that way.
Right.
And it's just, she just has this sexuality that just constantly is oozing out of her.
Yeah. And like, yep.
She's just a little sex god.
And what's that part that Irene says in the beginning? Stepping always on the edge of danger.
Mm-hmm.
Always aware, but not drawing back or turning aside. Like, Claire is constantly acting in this manner.
She plays life on a knife's edge the entire time. And when you learn her actual like marital situation in the next chapter, you're like, oh Lordy, like you're crazy.
Ma'am.
Talk about playing with fire, like insane. Oh Lord.
Yeah.
But Claire keeps trying to set up times to meet with her again after they leave the Drayton, right? And Irene keeps finding excuses, but not really finding them because they seem to all be real. She keeps finding excuses to not see Claire, but Claire doesn't seem to she's gonna see Irene again. She doesn't care.
Right.
It's going to happen.
I also meant to mention that I had a little sticky note here from the first time I read it, that part where Claire finally reveals who she is. I say, I already sensed something sinister about Claire, and I'm not sure why. Claire was disturbing me on this first go around with this read. I just couldn't pinpoint, like, why does she seem like such a sinister person? But okay, anyway.
Because there's just something about her.
Yeah.
But this chapter's quite long for this book. And so it takes them quite a long time to do this, because this is where they go through Claire's whole history and this idea of her getting taken away to this family they never knew about after Bob Kendry dies.
Right.
And there's all these rumors about her, about what she's doing. People have seen her here and there being glamorous in clubs with white men in limousines.
Exactly.
Is she a call girl? Is she an escort? How is she surviving? And then she just kind of falls off the face of the earth and everybody moves on with their life, right?
Yep.
So this is the conversation that's going on while they're sitting here, or at least these are the thoughts Irene's having while she's sitting here having tea with Claire. I love how Claire even has a pet name for her. You know, she sees somebody for the first time in a long time and she just goes right back to nicknames that she never uses anymore. And she's just like, Reenie. Oh, Reenie. Oh, Reenie. Right.
Like no time ever passed.
Yeah. Now, it's very familiar. Very quickly.
I did have a few notes. So I did, again, like triple underline where Irene says, like, Claire has this having way. Mm-hmm. She mentions that, twice. Mm-hmm. Claire always had a having way with her. Precisely that. The words came to Irene as she sat there on the Drayton roof facing Claire Kendry. A having way, which is so true. And then when they're talking about, where is that? Okay. So Irene is basically saying, you're the last person I would have expected to see here. And then Claire's like, preferably you, though, because she was saying that she wanted to see Claire. Still, I imagine that because I've thought of you often, and often while I'll wager, you've never given me a thought. And that little line right there was full of so much to me, which felt like resentment.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of bitterness in Claire.
Yeah.
A lot.
And then this, to me, this kind of sets up Claire too. It's like you can see that this is a no-nonsense woman, and she's not afraid to call you out on what she perceives as BS, because then Claire kind of asked her, well, like, what were people saying about me when I left? And Irene's basically like, I don't remember. And Claire says, oh, Renee, she cried, of course you remember, but I won't make you tell me, because I know just as well as if I'd been there and heard every unkind word. Oh, I know. I know. So it's like, she wants to call you out on your BS. She wants you to know that she already knows, even if you're not big enough or man enough, quote unquote, to tell the truth.
She'll still let you know she knows.
She knows. And so, again, Claire, just that upper hand, claiming that power, claiming that top dog position. Like, you think I don't know? Oh, I know. Even if you don't want to tell me. I really enjoyed that scene.
Yeah.
Because what I also wrote was like, Irene is a very dignified Black woman. She's not going to, quote unquote, stoop to certain levels. She's a married woman, a mother, she has manners. She's, So she's always trying to remain in that position of the dignified Black woman.
And she's not just a dignified Black woman. She's a dignified Black woman of status in the Black community.
Yes.
She is, she is a doctor's wife. She has some amount of social standing within the community. And she understands her role within that and how she should be behaving.
Yes.
For to keep that.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think it's interesting. What I thought was interesting is that they have this whole conversation about passing while sitting at the Drayton, trying to remain like incognito. And they're having this whole conversation about it, about how,
Yeah. Well, more interesting is that Claire knew that Irene was curious about Claire's passing. And so she just kind of opened up that whole conversation.
Yeah. She's like, we need to, you want to talk about, but I think she enjoys being able to be like, I have something that's intriguing for you to figure out.
Oh yeah, she flaunts it.
Yes.
But also it's like, she's got these two white aunts. So she actually, if she got found out, she has white family. It's a little different when, I think, if you're passing and you've got white and Black living family. She's just got these two white aunts.
Yes, and I think that's very interesting because, like, in chapter 3, we get another. So you end up with 3 characters. I don't know why I held up 6, but you get 3 characters who are passing in some form.
Yes, which was so.
And they're all doing it in different ways, and it's so subtly different. But like the thing that makes it so easy for Claire is that Claire, she is part white. She isn't just light skinned. She lived with her white aunts after her dad died. And even though they treated her like a servant, she got to live amongst white people and could mimic and learn how to be in that world and act like she's in that world.
And there was no talk or mention of the South Side or any of her Black connections.
No,
none of that was going on.
So she could very easily sort of separate herself from that Black piece of her and just embrace the white piece of her.
Yeah, because she did have a white story. She had a white story, legitimately.
She had a way to erase that. I mean, but Irene is a Black woman who can pass. Her husband, we learn, is a very dark-skinned Black man.
Exactly.
So what are you doing with that? It's not like you can go out together, right?
Right.
And then Gertrude, who we meet, has a whole different combination of,
I can't wait to get to that. Yeah.
Of how to pass and a life, right? So it's there isn't one way.
Right.
And she very skillfully tells us all of this.
Exactly.
That there's many ways in which we could be in your society and you wouldn't even know it.
You don't even know it.
And I wonder how terrifying that thought may have been for people reading this when it was written.
Oh, to be a fly on those walls.
Right? Because it's not said, it's not overt. It's not,
oh no,
well, we're in your restaurant, but it is. It's we're in your restaurants and
yeah,
we're in your hotels and we're, in your bedroom and we're,
yeah,
we could be anywhere.
exactly,
You wouldn't know
exactly,
it. And you're writing this at a time where having even a drop of blood
right.
made you
That's right.
Black.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
the horribly racist people must have been like
Right.
shitting themselves.
Right.
Thinking like,
Throwing this book in the fire afterwards. No, we
how could
reject
you
this.
tell? How could you tell? How do we know?
Absurd. Oh boy.
Yeah, it's just so beautiful. It's so
It's
well
so good.
done.
So
I
good.
think what I really liked, and I'm gonna pick up on this, is when Irene says, because she talks all about how her aunts are like they're good like God-fearing women, right?
I know where you're going with this.
And Irene says, have you ever stopped to think, Claire, how much unhappiness and downright cruelty are laid to the loving kindness of the Lord, and always by his most ardent followers, it seems?
Got it highlighted. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Because that is relevant even today.
Like how much.
Oh yeah.
How much does that still hit like so hard?
It hit so hard because it is so real because it's happening right now.
And it's just this one little paragraph that's just like, have you ever stopped to think?
Yep.
Just gonna leave that there and we're gonna move on, and you, the reader, can do what you want with that. But you ever thought about that?
Question though, right? It's a powerful question.
How many people use the loving kindness of the Lord to justify their hate?
Okay.
Their violence,
their cruelty. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And always by its most ardent followers, it seems.
Well.
Oh, Nella. Oh, if you were alive today. Whew.
We could have so many conversations. Yeah. Yep. But you get more and more information about what Claire was doing before today. Right. And you find out she has this husband. He's some sort of banker. She has a husband. What's interesting is you don't know her last name through most of this.
Yeah, I pointed that out.
She's always Claire Kendry. She's Claire Kendry, Claire Kendry. And it takes pages upon pages before you find out the married identity of Claire.
Right.
So it's almost like Claire has two identities just as Claire.
Yeah.
Claire has all these identities. She's Claire Kendry. She's Claire Bellew. She's Claire. She's two different Claires. She's like 97 different Claires. She's all the Claires.
There was one other piece, and it was right after Irene asked that question about, the holy people, where Claire says, I knew I wasn't bad looking and that I could pass. You can't know, Greenie, how when I used to go over to the South Side, I used to almost hate all of you. You had all the things I wanted and never had. It made me all the more determined to get them and others. Can you understand what I felt? And I was like, that was the first time that I actually felt bad or felt some kind of empathy for Claire from this one statement, because it just made me think about little girl Claire and being poor and being with this horrific father of hers and having these friends who were living these middle-class lives who didn't have to struggle. And here she was, having to steal, things to make a silly little frock for her church a picnic. And that was the first time that I felt a little bit of empathy for Claire.
And it's clear, and it shows you that a lot of what's happening with Claire now in this coming back to Chicago, this coming back to her old life, this coming back to her Blackness is out of filling some lack that was happening when she was a child. That she was always separate from the other kids. She builds this whole life and makes this whole thing for herself so that she can survive or whatever and get all the things that she likes, especially money. But there's a piece that's missing. And that's her blackness is missing, right? Like she just wasn't that.
Yeah.
And she's flirting now with losing everything she has so that she can fill that void.
Exactly. She just ran away from him with complete abandon and didn't, when you're that young, you're not thinking about, well, what are the repercussions of me doing this?
Yeah.
If I leave a piece of me behind, what does that mean for me 15, 20 years down the road? What does my life look like? You're not thinking about that when you're 15.
No, but I will say, if you turn the page a couple pages or like a page or two, she does say when they're talking about basically how Claire's quite wealthy. She says, money's awful nice to have. In fact, all things considered, I think, Rainey, that it's even worth the price.
Yeah.
So, she knows that she's given up a lot of things to get what she has, but she still, even with that lack, she still thinks that she's justified and right in her decision, because this is of all the things that she lacked. Well, I think she thinks she tells herself this.
She tells herself. Or does she just want to look? Does she just want to look to other people that the decision that she's made is right with her and okay with her?
Perhaps.
She's a hard one to figure out sometimes.
Well, I don't know if even she knows what she wants.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I think she wants two things that can't coexist, especially in 1920s America. She wants to be both of her personalities, and I can imagine that it's something that's still difficult for some people now, depending on your family situation, to be of mixed descendants of any kind. And where is your culture? Where is your heritage? Like, who are you? Especially if you look more like one than the other, does that invalidate the one you don't look like? There's a lot at play here.
Yeah, and that's so true. That's so
in
true.
1920s America, like you couldn't do anything, right? If you're not, you can't be white and black and be accepted by both sides.
Right.
And in reality, you're probably outside of both to some extent.
Yeah.
So I don't think she knows. I don't think she truly knows if she's made the right choice. But I think she knows that it's better to be rich than to be poor.
Oh, for sure.
She's been poor.
Right. And she knows how fun that is not.
Mm-hmm. And she's not going to do that again. Yeah.
Yeah.
That she knows for sure.
She knows poor as a child, and she sees poor from looking at her father, and she ain't going back there.
And this is when I started to make those Gatsby, like weird Gatsby connections in my head. Between Claire,
tell me, because I have not read Gatsby.
Between Claire and Jay. So Jay Gatsby is this mysterious rich man, right? And nobody knows where all his wealth comes from, but he just sort of shows up on the scene one day. He starts throwing these fabulous parties. He's very, very wealthy. He's doing all of this because he wants to get his childhood love back, who's like across the bay or whatever. And eventually, through word of mouth, like he gets to meet Daisy again, and he tries to woo her away from her husband and all this stuff. But what you learn by the end of the story is that Jay is actually a very poor man who had met Daisy once a long time ago and had fallen in love with her, and has now done everything in his being to make himself of the standing to deserve Daisy. And he's done so with by doing, like bootlegging and all kinds of nefarious things, which are secret. And so it's like there's this weird, in my mind, connection between Claire and Jay, because like he's trying to make himself into something he is not, and reach into a world where he doesn't quite belong, and he has to do so through dangerous means. And if anybody finds out, everything would crumble, and everything that he wants would be crumbled. Like Daisy would never want him if she finds out he's actually just a criminal, right? It doesn't. It's all smoke and mirrors. It doesn't matter that there's wealth. It doesn't matter that there's all the things. It's all smoke and mirrors. But then you have Claire, who's building this whole life for herself that's teetering on a knife's edge. And if anybody finds out that she isn't white, She loses it all. Everything she's done to gain what she feels like will make her happy, things that will make her happy, will all come crumbling when her secrets are found out.
Right. Also, more smoke and mirrors. Okay.
So that's where my brain was going. Yes. And like, and they're very different worlds and they're very different things, but there's just this theme of
the secrets, right?
And just trying to achieve something that you can't think of any other way to achieve it. There is no other way. So you must go through dangerous routes.
Yeah.
And there's different dangers and everything's very different. These are very different stories, but just that theme. My brain just kept circling back to Gatsby as I was reading.
That's interesting. Maybe I'll read Gatsby this week.
And like, nobody really knows Gatsby and nobody really knows Claire.
Right.
And all for different reasons, but I didn't end up like in the 20s, and I just had this whole brain train ride that happened.
Yeah. No, but I can totally see how you're thinking about those two people as being very similar. They have very similar backgrounds, very similar goals, very similar desires. And also they both have very similar dangerous outcomes should the smoke be cleared away.
And they both have like demises. And so like, their story arcs are almost like you can plot little points along the way where they meet the same kind of very generic moments.
Right. That's really interesting. Huh. Okay. All right.
That's why, like, in my mind, I'm like, if you're after reading this and we're reading it a second time, I feel like, and I've read the Great Gatsby a few times, I feel like if you really want the great American novel, you have to put these two together. And then you have a really good understanding of at least 1920s America. So you're frozen on Twitch, but that's okay. It's cool. But yeah, I go read Gatsby after this and tell me what you think. Maybe I'm having a moment. Like, maybe this is just like a weird Alyssa brain tangent. But I feel like if you put the two of them together, if you read them together, it's a much better collective picture of that period of America. And not so different
to me.
Not so different than today either. I mean, and Gatsby's very white and therefore very racist.
Yeah.
And then this is not very white and still highlights racism, right? So, but it's a very different viewpoint. It isn't racist, but it talks about racism and race. Right. And I think if you put the two of them together, they're just a really interesting pair.
Yeah, well, I have to read Gatsby anyway to prepare for one of our June reads for the TBR Lowdown book club.
Yes. So that's your homework. Read the two of them and then read it and then tell me what you think. It's very short.
I will. Yeah. Okay.
Anyway,
more on that next week, folks.
Back to class. Anyway.
Okay, back to class. Yeah. Okay. So,
where were we? Oh, we were talking about them talking about passing.
Oh, yes.
Money, how money's surely great. Yes.
Right.
And then, yep.
And then skimming through again.
And then there's the whole back and forth of trying to get them to see each other.
Right. And there was your line about the Negro eyes.
Yep.
Coming close to the end of that chapter.
Yep.
Because
the seduction of Claire Kendry's smile.
How easy it is to pass.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
But I mean, like, all the ways that they describe her lips painted a brilliant geranium red were sweet and sensitive and a little obstinate. A tempting mouth.
Yeah. A tempting mouth. That's something, right? Again.
Yeah.
Feels like it's full of desire to me.
Long lashes, arresting eyes, slow and mesmeric.
Right.
I mean, even when they finally agree that they'll see each other on Tuesday, they say goodbye, and Irene is thinking about the seduction of Claire's smile.
Right.
It's all very longing.
It is. It is.
She went from never of even thinking of Claire for years to being completely enthralled by her in one tea and a few cigarettes.
I tell you.
I wish I had that kind of power.
Tell me about it. Claire's got that. She just got that thing.
Yeah.
I love how Larsen writes how Claire looks. Mm-hmm. It is full of desire and sensuality, and I like that.
She is a sexual woman.
Yeah.
And she knows it.
Yeah. I just appreciate that.
Yeah. I think there's a lot to admire in Claire, and there's a lot to find disgusting.
Well, yeah, and to be wary of, for sure. So,
hey, Caleb.
You know.
So there's a lot that it's definitely interesting.
Yeah.
But I think the best part of this chapter is the way it ends.
Yeah. Yeah.
We get one sentence.
You know, here's the thing. Oh no, that's the next part. Never mind. Okay, never mind. Never mind. I have a note, but it's for the very beginning of the next chapter. Of 3.
Well, after all of this seduction and you know, sweet lips and memory, like going down memory lane and all this, Irene states very clearly and succinctly she was through with Claire Kendry,
which we all know
cannot be true because we're only
BS. Like
we're only on chapter 2. We're only on chapter 2.
No one believed it.
No one believes it.
The moment I read that, I was like, "Oh, that means we'll be having more of Claire Kendry."
Claire will be back. Don't worry.
Yeah. And so we enter into chapter 3 of part 1, and here we go with, like you're saying, now we're on a Tuesday morning, a dome of gray sky rose over the parched city, but the stifling air was not relieved by the silvery mist that seemed to hold a promise of rain which did not fall. And Irene's getting ready for something, and the phone is just ringing just all throughout the day. And it's Claire over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have highlighted here the telephone. For hours it had rung like something possessed. Since 9 o'clock, she'd been hearing it insistent jingle. And what I wrote here, I said, there's that having way of Claire. Like, oh, you don't want to pick up when I call the first time. Well, I'm just going to keep calling. I'm going to keep calling until you finally pick up. And I became so annoyed with Claire in this moment. Like, you and your having way. And also, you're trying so hard to seep into the life of Irene. And I just became very upset with her.
Well, I was, that is how I read it. And then I started thinking, and I'm like, Irene is telling this story. So how much did that telephone really ring? How much did Claire pursue her? How much is real? This is when I start, like, now that I'm like questioning Irene and her ability to remember facts, I'm like, is she trying to paint this so that it looks like Claire pursued her?
Oh.
Like, did Claire really do this? Did Claire really call her over and over again? Or did she call once or twice and the maid made a couple excuses? And it's nice that they just allude to this maid because now you understand Irene's standing in the society.
Yes.
And Irene has things to lose too. She's not Claire rich, but she's not wanting for anything either.
Exactly.
She has a maid, she has a husband, she pays her bills, she can go to trips to Chicago and go shopping for her boys and do all these things, right? She's not,
well, as she said in the chapter before, I have everything I wanted, except maybe because we use a little bit more money, but other than that, I have everything I ever wanted.
She's everything she wants. So I mean, I wonder And it could very well be that the phone rang off the hook and it's Claire's having way, or is it Irene messing with the narrative to make herself
stop throwing in these curveballs
less culpable in this whole thing, right?
Oh,
I don't know. She's not here for us to ask. But we find
I mean, I totally see and understand your questioning. But when I think about what we know of Claire so far, it's like I can see her just like incessantly calling, because it's like, no.
But everything you know about Claire, you know,
it's still from Irene's perspective. Gah!
So like everything.
Oh, here we go, folks. Here we go. Now I just feel stuck.
But she finally answers this telephone call, and you get that same one-sided. I have here that, Claire never gets a chance to even talk. The way it's told to you, there's never even a chance for Claire to interject. It's not a dialogue. It is a monologue told at you. And I have bamboozled next to it. Like, she just gets bamboozled into this meeting.
Yeah.
But you finally get her name. Now you know she's Mrs. John Bellew.
Exactly. Oh, yeah, because I did make a note about chapter 2 when they were having their whole conversation at the Drayton. And I was like, you just can't trust when someone wants to get all the information from you, and at the end of it all, you don't even know their last name. And I was like, beware.
Yes, because Irene says on the way out, she's like, I don't even know what her husband's name is.
Exactly.
We get it. We get there.
Yeah.
But we have to bamboozle Irene a little bit together.
Oh my God. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Now you get my wheels turning.
Sorry.
Yeah. So, that was a good curveball, because you're right. Like, this is all from Irene's perspective.
But even after this whole phone call, that's very bamboozling. Just like, how have you been? Where are you? Can you come to tea? Blah, 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 blah. We're here. It's under this name. Come here. Boom. Hang up.
Right.
Irene says, what was it about Claire's voice that was so appealing? So very seductive. We just keep going back to this alluring, pulling you in pieces of her nature.
Exactly. The irresistibleness, is that a word?
She is irresistible.
Of Claire. Like, she just, when you were in her realm, and you have like no power.
Yeah. And you see that later at the parties and things, like everyone just kind of gets sucked. She has gravity. She sucks people in. Yeah. And so you can't, it's hard to get out.
Yeah.
There is no escaping. But the question is, does Irene really want to escape?
Yeah, right.
I feel like it depends on the moment. But does she really want to escape?
Yeah,
I don't know.
On the moment, and it depends in the moment, and if she feels like she has something to lose in that moment by not escaping the charms of Claire.
Well, this chapter is an escaping chapter.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
How do we want?
And it's also where we finally get introduced to the
Gertrude.
Other path of passing.
But it's also the chapter where I can't say half the words in it.
Okay. This is fun.
So there's that. Don't worry. John can say them a lot.
Yes, that's right. He sure can.
But I feel like I love that there's no break. We go from this phone call and boom, you're at the morgue. She's kissing Irene on the cheek, and we are right into this meeting. And she's getting the first trick of I feel like Claire plays 2 tricks on Irene, and the first trick is Gertrude.
Yes.
Walks in, and you can tell
How
there's
are you?
something between the two of them that they don't like each other. Miss Gertrude and Miss Irene, they don't like each other.
Yes, with the and how are you, Gertrude?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Not hey, Gertrude, good to see you. No. And how are you, Gertrude?
Your ass was gonna be here. And
right, exactly. That's exactly what you feel from that line.
Mm-hmm. And then you immediately find out about Gertrude.
Should I read that? Because I do have that part highlighted because I was like, oh, well, this is interesting. All right. So
Gertrude, I wish there was more of Gertrude because I feel like Gertrude's life is very interesting.
Oh, I have so many questions. So for Gertrude, too, had married a white man, though it couldn't be truthfully said that she was passing. Her husband, what was his name, had been in school with her and had quite well aware, had been quite well aware, as had his family and most of his friends, that she was a Negro. It hadn't, Irene knew, seemed to matter to him then. Did it now, she wondered? Had Fred Martin, that was it. Had he ever regretted his marriage because of Gertrude's race? Had Gertrude? And when I read that part, I was like, oh, I hadn't even thought about this whole path of passing because if well, I guess she really isn't passing if one, her husband, his family, and most of his friends know that you're not passing.
It's so just everywhere else she's passing.
Right. But then my other thing was, well, when they're an unfamiliar or in situations where it's not family, does she then pass? Or is it always, I'm just a light-skinned black woman married to a white man? I just wondered, do they play around with passing based on who they're around?
I would imagine in this time period in America, if she's married to a white man, which was illegal in many states, she passes.
Yeah.
I would imagine.
It was so interesting, though, her situation.
Her situation is very interesting, especially like how okay everybody is with it, because you can tell how strange that is to at least Irene, because she's her narrator, how strange that is. Like you could get the sense of how rare Gertrude's situation is.
Yeah.
Because, Claire comes from a biracial family, and that was definitely not accepted. And they knew, but you had, what do they call it? The stain of the tar or like some horrible phrase. Like they could forgive the shame, but not the stain or something like that.
Exactly.
Whatever, throwing in the tar brush. They couldn't forgive the tar brush.
That's it. Yeah.
Ugh, what a phrase. Anyway.
I know. Yeah, I wanted a glimpse into Gertrude's life.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it doesn't seem like they don't care that she isn't like them. But
well, it just kind of tripped me out because it's like, not only does her husband know, but also, some close friends too, like your friends. I mean, my mom was just like all over the place. Like how did that work out? How did that come to be?
But it seems to be fine. Gertrude doesn't seem to have any issues.
Oh, there's no issue with her. None. Fascinating.
What I like throughout this whole chapter is how Claire is the master of all of this. She will allow things to happen and then she redirects conversations, or she moves swiftly into tea. So like you can tell that there is something between these two women. They say hello, but she swiftly directs them to tea, right? So now they're going to drink tea.
Yes, because she's got to get them ready for the show.
Getting ready for the show. Like, I'm expecting Jack at any second. I'm expecting Jack.
Right.
Any second. Let's get to tea. Let's get this over with.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, that's something else. I was like, what? Just popped up on my phone. And Gertrude remains silent. I have somewhere that Gertrude is the foil to Claire. Gertrude is plain and like a little ill at ease. She's not as full of herself. She's a little broader and she's not the beauty, right?
Yeah, like how they were describing her.
And fat and poorly fat. And she's a little bit of aged and a little bit of she seems like her life's been a little hard on her, whereas Claire is this beauteous queen, but also Gertrude sort of, I feel like, mirrored Irene. They both have 2 young boys. They're both married. They both have some sort of safety in their lives. They have this traditional kind of life that they're leading, whether they're passing or not. There's stability.
But they don't have the secret of passing. So they don't have that constant fear in their marriage as Claire does. They don't have that big secret in their marriages. Irene is not passing, and Gertrude's husband knows she's Black. So there is no big shoe waiting to fall at some point in their marital lives.
Yeah. And then they start talking about the things that the biggest thing that could give the game away, right? Having a child.
Oh gosh. This part, Alyssa, I was dying. I'm sorry. I don't know about you, but I was kind of like, first of all, it was kind of funny how they were just like, they were talking about babies like they were products. Like when Irene says, one of my boys is dark, and then it says, Gertrude jumped as if she'd been shot at. Her eyes googled, her mouth flew open. She tried to speak, but could not immediately get the words out. Finally, she managed to stammer, "Oh, and your husband, is he dark too?" I mean, I just found it hilarious.
Gertrude's response to all that is just cool because they spend so long going back and forth, and like Gertrude is just so grateful that neither of her sons, the twins, were very dark, and because you could just go, that could skip like so many generations and just out of nowhere. And I love the phrase "pop up," like suddenly. And then I'm not having any more children because what if the next one? And then Claire is like, well, no, I can't possibly have any more children. Like, Marjorie's just fine. And if I have any more, the jig is up. Everybody knows. And poor Irene, and they're like, I have babies. They're fine. One of them's dark. What are you 2 women talking about?
Oh my God. Like, Alyssa, this whole part, just like the way I'm laughing now, this is how I was laughing reading this the first time. It's just so, this was like, to me, like a little moment of comic relief. Although there's reality in what they're saying, but it was just so funny. It was just so funny.
I felt so bad for Irene through this whole thing because I see her like her head ping-ponging through this whole thing. Like, what?
Right. Right.
Because I think that Irene really does. She is a good mother and she loves her boys and she's doesn't care about any of this other stuff. And you get the sense that everybody else, like the kids are just a thing that you do, right? It's just boxes that you're checking off in your life. Like, I'm a wife now I have kids. Right. Like Gertrude's like, double check, gave you twin sons. Excellent. Moving on. Right. Claire's
they're both not dark, so good on me.
Claire's like, I gave you a not dark daughter. That's all you're getting. And
right. Exactly. Because I'm not going to go through that fear again. Right.
But and then I just love that there's the one little thing here. And I again felt bad for Irene because Irene's the only one who's coming off good in this whole thing is when they're talking about, oh gosh, what's his name now? Claude Jones, and now he's a Black Jew.
Oh yes,
and they're all like laughing at him like it's some comedic thing that he's doing, and Irene's the only one who goes, well, maybe he's doing this. He possibly might be sincere in changing his religion. Surely everyone doesn't do everything for a gain.
That was a dig at Claire. That's how did you take that as a dig at Claire? Because I certainly did.
Yeah. But Irene's the only one who's sitting there like, well, maybe not everybody's like you two bitches.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Prefers Judaism. Can we
right.
leave Claude alone?
Right. Leave Claude alone.
But it's also just very interesting that's in there because they never really talk about that again, right?
No, they don't. They don't.
It's just like one moment for Irene to be the moral superior, right? Irene gets to go, you know what?
Right.
No.
I just felt like this whole scene was perfect. I loved it.
Well, it's great. And then you get trick number 2.
Oh boy, yeah.
John entering the building.
Oh man. You know, John Belew's a real gift.
Here's the thing, and this is how you know that Claire is setting this all up. She says,
"Yeah,
oh, lovely. Here's Jack at exactly the right minute."
Right, like right on cue, as the performance schedule says.
Right, open and John shows up, and he enters with. He makes a scene.
He says, "Hello, Nig," was his greeting to Claire. I looked at them and I said, "What is happening?"
You could hear a record skip. You know, like I feel like that's happening, and Gertrude and Irene's brains are like, "What did he just call her?"
Right.
Did I hear that correctly? You know what? And it also made me think about, because he goes on and explains why he calls her that.
Right.
Because when he married her, she was white as a lily, but I declare she's getting darker and darker.
Right. It just says, I tell her if she don't look out, she'll wake up one of these days and find she's turned into a nigger. And so right before that, let me get back to Irene, because, you know, Irene is this, like, you know, very classy, dignified woman. And so she hears him refer to Claire as Nig, and she's like, but how rude, how possibly insulting for him to address her in that manner in the presence of guests. You know, so even in this moment, she's thinking, right, guest. So even in this moment, she's like, oh no, she's still Miss Manners in this moment. It's like, this is highly unlikely. I just like how it kind of went right back to Claire's, like, you know, she's got a way of doing things, a way of, you know, treating people, a way of being spoken to, yada, yada. Like, it always goes down to the manners and the right way of doing things and saying things.
Claire makes sure that nobody misses it. She goes, did you hear what Jack called me? Like, just in case anybody missed the introduction.
Right.
His entrance on the stage.
Right.
And tell him, dear, why you call me that. She wants everybody to know. She's playing for, this is her audience. She's playing this scene for her girlfriends so that they can, almost like she's proud that she has duped this terribly racist man into being a husband.
Who's so hell-bent on the fact that he hates Negroes. But yet, he's with me. I am the one who fooled him. You know, this moment almost feels slightly psychotic.
Well, I think often Claire feels very on the edge of psychosis. Like, she needs some lithium or something. Like, there's something not quite right in Claire's brain. But
and this goes back to her being that dangerous woman, right? Like we were talking about. Like it says here, always on the edge of danger. It's like, ooh,
if you
Claire.
spend your whole life living that way, and if you spend your whole life as a lie, and you internalize all the little T traumas that is, plus all the big T traumas of your racist husband, you kind of would go a little insane, wouldn't you?
I guess you would. Because you're always on the outskirts of reality.
Yeah, and she is on the outskirts of reality. But you know what this also made me think of is I have seen this in similar moments in other, like, with my ex Argentine family. There would be, and everybody's white, but the darkest person, they would call them negro, and you're like,
oh, right, yeah.
And I would show up, and then I remember people talking about this person, and I'm like, okay, and I'm expecting somebody black, right? And like everybody's joking around, and it's just like a slightly tanned white dude, and I'm like, why? I'm like, and the rest of you aren't that much lighter than him, so why are you calling him? It's something that's so strange to me.
Exactly.
And then you read it here, and it's like, clearly, it's not that strange.
Right, exactly. I mean, this part was a trip. Tell them, dear, why you call me that. I mean, this whole part was just insane.
She is proud of that.
And he's just telling the story.
And he keeps going on and on.
Oh, yeah.
And she's
on and
laughing and laughing. And they're all laughing. Everybody's laughing. And it's very like mental asylum sort of feeling where these people are just giggling and giggling and giggling through.
Yes.
While John is telling this story.
And then we get to the part where Irene said, "So you dislike Negroes, Mr. Bellew?" But her amusement was at her thought rather than her words. John Bellew gave a short, denying laugh. "You got me wrong there, Mrs. Redfield. Nothing like that at all. I don't dislike them. I hate them. And so does Nig, for all she's trying to turn into one. She wouldn't have a nigger maid around here for love nor money. Not that I want her to. They give me the creeps. The black, scrimey devils." I can't even imagine the faces of Irene and Gertrude. Like,
the whole thing is just like insane. But then, you know what I was thinking? It was like, of course she doesn't want a black maid. They might realize she's black.
Duh.
Because the white people haven't caught on
those black eyes.
And if you stare at her long enough, like Irene's staring at her and examining her and examining her and then finally it dawns on her how much has every white person in her life looked at her and never seen it.
Exactly. Oh boy, this whole. Didn't we say Mr. Bellew, John Bellew was a treat? He is a treat.
Oh, he's a treat. I mean, even says she had a leaping desire to shout at the man beside her, and you're sitting here surrounded by 3 black devils drinking tea.
Right.
I kind of wish she had.
Right.
Part of me kind of wish, but then the story would be over. But
yeah, exactly. Yeah, this was a.
But he quickly comes in, does this whole thing, and then he exits again with his whole, sorry, old girl. I'm not doing all the words. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bore you.
Right. Yeah, this was. Yeah, this is a psychotic scene. I'm sorry. It's just like we are not in reality right now. This was insane.
But like Irene is clearly enraged here, though. I mean, she's going on. She's so bad. All the while she was speaking, she was thinking how amazing it was that her voice did not tremble and that outwardly she was calm. Only her hands shook slightly.
Yeah. Because then Irene recognizes how dangerous it is. And they'll mention this in the next pages going forward, but like Irene recognizes that Clara put them all in a very dangerous situation.
Incredibly dangerous. This isn't like the hotel where she would have been politely escorted out and it would have been embarrassing. This is actually incredibly dangerous. Claire could be arrested, I believe, at that time for, or could at least be sued and have everything taken away from her for tricking her husband. There was a big famous case. I was watching something about it and I can't remember the name of it, where like a wealthy man married, I think she was like some percentage of black, which doesn't really matter in that time period, but so she's somewhat mixed, and he knows, like he writes her all these love letters and does all these things, and eventually, I think because the family threatened to disown him after he had gotten married, like he brings a divorce case. And at those times, divorces are like in court and very quickly sign anything. And they basically, she had to prove her lawyers just had to prove that he knew there was no duping. But if she had been duping him, she would have been in a lot of trouble. Like he married her willingly because it wasn't illegal to marry I don't believe it was illegal to marry in New York, but it was definitely looked down upon. And then legally you could get into the lying part that could get you into trouble.
And not to mention, quite honestly, but not to mention, honestly, like, John Bellew could have just killed her.
Yeah.
There's that of just having something
and
so shocking revealed.
And nobody would have done anything because he would have said, my wife, whatever.
Yeah.
My wife has been lying to me and I killed her, and everyone would have been like, oh, well, that's justified. Exactly. How dare she?
Exactly. She was in the wrong. Good
well,
riddance.
Well, we have to remember we have another call. We have another live in 20 minutes.
I know, we haven't even. Oh gosh,
okay,
how many pages do we have left?
We're getting there. We have 6 pages.
We're getting there. Okay.
All right, but there was a thing called like a rage defense or something like that. And I learned that in The Last Call, that nonfiction book I was reading about this murderer that was killing gay men, and it was like there are definitely people that are still alive today that got off on this defense that if you could like brutally murder somebody because you were so shocked that they were revealed to you that they were a gay man. And I'm sure it's the same defense that could be used for, I was so shocked to find out that my husband of 5 years is actually a black man and I killed him in his sleep, and everyone would be like, oh, you poor thing. Like, how dare you? Poor you.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's absolutely like, if you look at it with today's brain, you're like, how? You still killed somebody.
Right.
Whatever your other morals are, you still killed somebody.
That person is now in the dirt because of you.
But all right.
Make it make sense.
Doesn't make sense. Moving on.
Okay. All right. Okay. So we're getting to the end. All right. So
we finally get to find out that Claire's Irene's husband's a doctor. Ooh.
Yeah. Yep.
He's a dark doctor.
Okay. Yep. He's a dark doctor. Reading my little notes in here. Oh, I just have this note here from my first time reading it. Claire is such a dangerous woman, reckless. Yeah. She really bothered me when I just read this the first time. She just bothered me. Is this when they
Claire
left?
was so darling, so lovely, and so having. It keeps coming up.
Yes, I have that highlighted. Yep, the having.
Yes, eventually they do leave, right?
Yeah.
Claire offers them tea, and they decide that they're all like, well, no, thank you. That show was enough.
Let's talk about, so when they leave, so it says, it had been, Irene acknowledged, a distinctly trying experience, as well as a very unpleasant one. I was more than a little angry myself, and imagine her not telling us about him feeling that way. Anything might have happened. We might have said something. That, Irene pointed out, was exactly like Claire Kendry, taking a chance and not at all considering anyone else's feelings. Again, just like they were talking about in the beginning, how Claire does these things, and always living on the edge of danger and knowing so, but not turning it aside or turning away, just continuing to do it regardless of anyone else's feelings.
Care. Oh, it's so.
And then here's Gertrude. Maybe she thought we'd think it a good joke, and I guess you did the way you laughed. My land, I was scared to death that he might catch on. I mean, it's just crazy.
It's so weird. It's so, this whole scene is so jarring and memorable. Like, you're never going to forget this. And like, of course, like, just imagine being so shocked that you can't stop laughing. It is like this moment of like mental breaking where
it absolutely is. Because it's like, I'm here in this moment. I'm hearing it. But am I really hearing it? Is this really happening right now?
Is this really what's happening to me right now?
Yeah.
But
okay, so we go to chapter 4?
Yeah, they leave, blah, 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 blah. It was a trying time. And chapter 4 is only 2 pages, so we will wrap this up. It will happen. But chapter 4, we got through John.
Thank you.
Oh, the only last thing I wanted to say about chapter 3 was that, so we enter the day with it being dark and gloomy and the threatening, and it's at the very end of this chapter that the rain finally breaks. And it's like we've been barreling through this whole chapter in this moment, and it's like everything just releases. Like we the reader, Irene the narrator, we now know all the facts. We have, this is everything. Let it rain.
Exactly. I love that relation between the weather pacing along with the story. Like, they're in relation with one another. I like that.
Yeah. And now we're back into an interior. It's like safe and quiet, and we're back in an interior.
Right.
And we get another letter.
Oh, the letters. Renee, dear, however am I to thank you for your visit? I know you're feeling that under the circumstances, I ought not to have asked you to come, or rather insisted. But if you could know how glad, how excitingly happy I was to meet you, and how I ached to see more of you, to see everybody and couldn't, you would understand my wanting to see you again and maybe forgive me a little. My love to you always, and always to your dear father, and all my poor thanks, Claire.
My
And there
favorite
was
thing
a
about that whole letter. Wait, finish the postscript and we'll talk about the letter.
There was a postscript which said, "It may be, Renee dear, it may just be that after all, your way may be wiser and infinitely happier one. I'm not sure just now, at least not so sure as I have been. See."
So here's my summary of the letter. Claire admits that meeting her husband was awkward. Ought not to ask her under the circumstances. So glad to have Irene back in her life. Aches to see her again. Very clear use of the word aches there. Asks for forgiveness. Sends her love to everybody. She never actually apologizes for anything.
Right.
But she wants forgiveness. She can admit, she admits wrongdoing. She admits awkwardness. But she can never say, I'm sorry. She's incapable of actually understanding another person's feelings.
Yes.
It's all very Claire-centric. Claire knows that Claire did something wrong, but she's not sorry for anything that happened to the other person.
Exactly.
And she's never sorry for the other person. She's only sorry for herself. And even that, I don't think she's sorry for herself ever. She just changes it up.
That's it. Again, she's never considering the other person. Never. And I do, like, reading this letter, I was asking myself, is Clara slightly embarrassed by those antics that she displayed with her husband? Like, I'm still torn between that. What is Claire slightly embarrassed that she did that? Did it not go off the way she thought it would? Did she read the room wrong? Like, I'm still questioning that. I'm just not sure.
I feel like Claire knew everything that was going to happen. And I think that's why she's not apologizing. I think she set all of this up.
Okay.
I feel like the whole thing was a stage set by Claire. Why, I don't know. But I feel like she sets the stage for her friends, whether to prove how good she is at what she does, prove her worth in some way. I don't know what, get sympathy. Like there's a reason, but I feel like she is creating a stage, like she is on a stage, her life is a stage, and she set this whole scene up for her audience of her friends, specifically
I believe
Irene.
that too, but I'm wondering if she felt like it backfired. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like,
I feel like if it had backfired, I feel like she would have actually been remorseful in the letter. I feel like this is just like, it is almost like using your manners. Like she understands that it's like mimicking mannered behavior. Like she knows that she should do this, but she actually doesn't know how to, so she doesn't actually apologize. Right. What I thought was interesting is then Irene is ripping up and tearing up this letter, and it falls into, and they make it very clear to write a small heap on her black crepe de chine lap. And isn't crepe de chine black crepe? Isn't that what you wear when you're mourning? So it's also like, it seemed like this moment of like this is done. Something is.
Yeah. I did not pick up on that. But that could make sense.
Because she doesn't point out, like Claire gets a lot of her clothing pointed out, and very infrequently does Irene point out her clothing. True. And the fact that she's pointing out black crepe, like it's like I feel like it's like this friendship's over, right? Like I can't believe she did this to me, and she can't even apologize, right? And obviously that's not the case.
The destruction completed. She gathered them up, rose, and moved to the train's end. Huh.
And it's like she just lets like ashes, like she's letting go.
Yeah.
There's this like funeral of their friendship happening on this train back to her boys and her husband.
Right. Like, well, that was that. We're moving on now.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
And then we go into part 2, which we will talk about next week.
Right. I did highlight the last part because there was that reference again about Brian, her husband,
yeah.
Irene's husband, you know, that craving for some strange place and different. And then I wonder, are we talking about South America? Or are we like, it's still not clear. I'm still guessing what this whole thing with Brian is. Him, you know, wanting things to have this craving for some strange place and different. So, you know, what she says, well, okay, not so lonely that old queer unhappy restlessness had begun again within him, that craving for someplace strange and different, which at the beginning of her marriage she had to make such strenuous efforts to repress, and which yet faintly alarmed her, though it now sprang up at gradually lessening intervals. So it's like they're trying to
something brewing at home.
We don't know yet.
Yeah.
Oh boy,
there's something brewing at home. Well, we got to wrap this up because I got to use the ladies' room before we start our next thing.
So that was part 1, guys, of passing.
Part 1.
Just part 1.
2 hours. Part 1.
Just on part 1.
All right. Well, okay. I hope everyone enjoys the long stuff.
Yes. So, join us next week as we talk about part 2.
Yes. And follow us on Instagram at Dirty Nurse Reads, Bookladyreads, TBRLOWDOWN. You can follow us on Twitch. You can follow us here on Stereo. You can follow us. God, where else are we?
Instagram, yes, all that good stuff.
Find us everywhere.
Everywhere.
Everything's in our Instagram bios, and we're gonna quickly get off and get back on.
If you're on Instagram, follow the hashtag the Passing Reading Project, and you'll see all of our updates on Instagram. So thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.
Read Passing. Bye, everyone.
Read it. Bye.